The Pine River in St. Louis used to be a place where people came to get away from it all. In the 1800s, it was known for its mineral springs and fishing, but that's no longer the case. The contamination of this area begins with the 52-acre piece of land right across the river from me.
In the 1930s, a chemical plant opened up, Michigan Chemical. When they operated, there weren't any environmental laws.
They made a shipping error in May of 1973 where instead of sending the animal feed supplement to an animal feed supply facility, it happened to be in Battle Creek, Michigan, they shipped one large truckload of the flame retardant.
For almost a year, the citizens of the state of Michigan ate meat and drank milk that was contaminated with this fire retardant. That led to a massive investigation.
Jane Jelinek lived downstream from the plant on a farm.
And it would smell like a swimming pool because they had dumped so much chlorine and bromine overnight.
The plant closed in the late 70s. They were ordered to basically demolish everything, put a cap over their site, and dig up whatever places they dumped hazardous chemicals. And over time it was believed that the river would just somehow clean itself.
I personally was glad when the chemical plant shut down, not for the workers, they suffered, but just for the sake of the river. But the workers, I have to say, everybody knew how bad the chemical plant was, and they figured these guys were going to get sick and die, so they didn't want to hire them.
Even though the plant was closed and declared as the Vesicle Superfund site, more evidence of contamination appeared.
The DDT level, which was another chemical pesticide made at the plant, those concentrations increased in fish populations in the river. So something was going on. It hasn't been manufactured there for a couple of decades.
This forced the Environmental Protection Agency to investigate.
They start digging in the river and the sediment, and lo and behold, they find all these chemicals that have been dumped for decades when we didn't have environmental laws, right? So we were going to spend $32 million. We're just going to look at the river, clean up the river as best as we can.
They dug out about 750,000 cubic yards of contaminated sediment. They expected to go down at least 5 feet. They went 15 feet to get it all.
Now they've spent onwards between $150 and $200 million.
The EPA's cleanup on the Vesicle Superfund site is far from over.
Little silo that you see there, the gray silo in the distance, is a thermal treatment, and that's a case in which they put electrodes into the ground and they tried to drive out the most toxic part of the chemicals and capture those and dispose of them or break them down. On the other side is an actual remediation that's being done using bioremediation techniques.
After 50 years, we still have major contamination. We have major concerns with the human health.
The glioblastoma brain tumors in this area are significantly higher. Thyroid problems of any kind, including cancer, and that's directly connected with PBB.
The fish consumption ban on the Pine River from Alma Dam all the way down to where the river flows into the Chippewa and eventually to the Bawasee. So you are not supposed to consume any fish that you catch out of that river.
I mean, the people paying the cost of correcting this aren't the people who made the profits. I think we have to demand that we're more careful with what are seen as benefits and cost of operations like this.
It will never be able to be restored to any sort of economic viability that it once had. It is permanently, for all intents and purposes, contaminated.
We're in Alma, upstream from the Superfund site. This part of the Pine River is dealing with its own set of problems. Come June, here and other areas will be covered in aquatic vegetation and alga blooms.
It's very thick. It's probably 3 to 4 feet full of algae down the bottom.
We're not winning the battle. on clean water at all.
Gary Rayburn, Chuck Sandro, and Jane Jelinek all live upstream on the Pine River.
Every year it's so much worse. It's just really quite devastating.
This is new, this kind of algal bloom and bacterial loading, since we started to see the proliferation of confined animal feeding operations. These are the large livestock facilities that have special designation under the law. And so there are lots of animals very efficiently put in small areas and producing, manure that's collected and then it's put on fields. In flat areas, you have these drain tiles, which are pipes that wick away excess water when it rains, so it protects the fields from flooding.
The tile moves the water and other stuff into the purposes into the drain ditch.
Now we can visually see liquefied manure coming out of these pipes.
The water in these ditches flows into the Pine River.
There's an environmental piece to the upstream pollution, but the real risks for people is coming in contact with the water. There are signs up in the Elma boat launch from the Mid-Michigan District Health Department that say, this is not a safe place to come in contact with the water because of the high levels of E. coli, especially after rain events.
I remember about 3 years ago seeing one person swimming in the river, and I was dumbfounded.
I reached out to the Michigan Farm Bureau. They would not talk on camera. In a statement, they said Gratiot County received a grant to research problems and solutions for the watershed, and their consultant identified many sources of nutrients and E. coli entering the river, including septic systems, stream and road erosion, and farms either due to manure or soil loss. Farmers in the Pine River watershed are both aware and engaged in protecting and improving water quality in the area.
There are leaking septic systems, and Michigan has a terrible septic system situation, and that is absolutely true. The problem is where we see the most impact is not where people are living. There are no septic systems. There are no wastewater treatment plants. These are far away from any even small population sources. So, and then when we look at the volume of bacteria that we measure and the amount of nutrients that we find, the number of people in this county that are on septic systems, there's no possible way they can produce that much waste.
But I think a conservative number is to say that you can expect any given cow you see is producing probably 10 humans worth of manure a day.
These farmers spend money to try to meet the regulatory guidelines. They can spend all the money that it takes. They can do everything, dot every I, cross every T on the regulatory structure that's imposed. It's still not protecting the environment.
I'm not trying to criticize the farming community. I understand that, it's an important piece of it, but we have to find a way to come together. It's truly a we thing.
The state of Michigan said on record that there is no political will from either party to really tackle this problem directly. I think that there is a lot of political pressure by lobbying organizations to not impose stricter regulations.
Every 5 years, the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy updates permits for CAFOs. The most recent update was in 2020.
Eagle made a couple fairly modest changes, included some additional requirements around reporting where manure is going, had some additional restrictions around manure application in areas that already have known water quality issues, released the permit, and then the permit was immediately challenged by industry. It was Farm Bureau and then a handful of livestock commodity groups.
I reached out to State Senator Roger Houck and State Representative Jerry Nair. Both represent Gratiot County. Houck responded that he's not available for an interview, and I never heard back from Nair. I also called State Senator Sean McCann, the chair of the Energy and Environment Committee, and never heard back.
My personal opinion in fixing this has to start with campaign finance reform. If people with special interests have a weightier effect on decisions made by our elected officials, that's not right. If they can trump the science, that's not right.
And what it means is giving power to people to actually enforce the regulations. You know, if you have too many animals on a plot of land for that land to naturally process the waste, it's, and some people will be upset to say this, but it's stupid to allow too many. It's just like it was stupid, to be blunt, it was stupid, it was foolish to allow the chemical plant to dump waste for years that were destroying, you know, the environment, harming human health.
All my grandparents and their brothers and sisters used the river for fish, for water, for swimming, for ice skating, for canoeing, all of those things. And it's just not useful for that. It's too dangerous now. That's a legacy that I would rather we didn't have.
We're not going to give up. We're going to keep working every year, and one of these years we'll get something done.
Alma College is just a few blocks away from the Pine River. Professors and students have spent decades doing research on the river. About a decade ago, community members came together and formed the Healthy Pine River Group. They helped fund some of those projects.
We had been here for about 3 years, and I said, this is ridiculous, so 4 couples of us got together and we formed a little group, and I'm the only one left of the 4. They were older. But now we have 383 members.
The river's sick, and our mission is to try and restore it to a healthier state.
My roots are here. My family came to Gratiot County in 1854. I'm not willing to pull up roots and move on.
One of our biggest priorities is water testing annually. The college normally does that for us and does a great job.
Tim Keaton, a biology professor at Alma College, and some of his students recently conducted research on antibiotic resistance genes.
I really think ultimately that's a bigger issue than the E. coli.
We're 100% resistant to the antibiotics that are almost exclusively given to livestock. But we're also finding antibiotic resistant to human antibiotics.
And of course there are what many people would call legitimate uses for antibiotics, especially in a feedlot. You don't want pneumonia infections and other infections like that spreading throughout your herd. Decades ago, it was also discovered that certain antibiotics included in animal feeds helps the animals gain weight more rapidly.
Keaton and his students wanted to see if they could detect hot spots of genes known to provide resistance to sulfonamide and tetracycline.
The idea is you go to these sites and collect sediment samples, extract the DNA from the sediment, and you can look for the presence of these genes. And today we can also apply a technique called quantitative PCR that lets us look at relative levels of these genes in the sediments.
Not to their surprise, they found a handful of hotspots in the headwaters of the Pine River.
So Thatcher Creek is the red spot you see on that heat map that we showed. Obvious thing around there, very few homes. So what else could be the contributing factor? It's a lot of open ag fields that we know receive manure. It is also the location where there are 2 feedlot operations.
What's bad about that is bacteria are able to genetically transfer these genes that are resistant to antibiotics.
Really what this study is looking at is, are they mobilizing? Are they moving anywhere?
In April, Keaton presented the findings to the Healthy Pine River Group.
It's like we're crawling, you know. We work every year hard, but it seems like we make such a little progress.
We're going to continue to be sampling more areas and trying to nail down kind of the boundary of where this hotspot is.
To me, it's just a challenge to try and right the situation. It's not just in Alma, though.
It's been demonstrated we can reduce the concentration of these genes in manures with composting techniques. The tough thing is going to be finding out a composting or an aging technique that works well enough that isn't impossibly expensive. Then maybe we can get the ag industry on board to help try to reduce this threat. I mean, it is a threat to our health.
It costs money to do things right, but in the long run, it's better for not only the people that live on the river, but the whole community, including the farming community.
A lot of people ask me, why, we've been doing this for 20 years, why, nothing has changed. In fact, it's gotten worse. I think it's my duty, and it's the duty of all of us that live here, all of these people that have to put up with this every year and the health risks, to say to the government, you have to protect us, you have to protect this environment.
For this special report, Meredith St. Henry 9 and 10 News.